Tonight we welcome Dr. David Unger. He writes mysteries about a therapist named David Unger, ironically, who surely stumbles into
Makes it
mysterious...
easier to remember, you know.
In this fictional, no relation to Dr. David Unger, he stumbles into mysterious murders. He's no Sherlock Holmes. Think the love child of Miss Marple and Inspector Clouseau.
Don't think that.
Okay. Primarily, I think of Peter Sellers now. Primarily set in California in the 1980s, the novels brilliantly mix deadly crimes, quirky characters, and dry humor with valuable psychological insights into life, relationships, and what makes people tick. Something that I'm sure he gathered from his professional therapist career. Please welcome Dr. David Unger. So welcome. I'm just going to ask you one question, and then I'll let you turn it over to the talk. How did a therapist start a writing career?
Slowly. Well, I was growing up. My best friend, his father was a writer, and he had his office in his home. And my friend and I would walk by his office, and he would invite us in, and we would chat with him, and he'd ask us how the day was going, and he would talk to us. And his office had books very much like you do here, up to the ceiling, all over, and it was a very inviting place for me. My mom and dad, when they went off to work, I never saw them at work, but I saw my friend's dad at work, and I kind of liked it. I said, this is kind of a good deal. He's home, he gets to chat with people. So that was my model of what I wanted to do. And then I went off to boarding school, and my parents gave me a typewriter. I think that was because they knew I was a horrible writer in terms of my legibility. So, but when I got away from my friends and my would-be girlfriends, I wrote them letters. And I realized just how much fun it was to write, because I would write something and I never realized I had that thought, but all of a sudden there it was on paper. And I didn't get it then, but as a therapist now, therapists make a big deal out of making the unconscious conscious, and that's what I was doing then, and it caught my attention. So that's really what got me to want to be a writer. Let me tell you a little bit more about who I am and how I got into writing a mystery series. I imagine all of us have something in common. We love to read books. And there's a really bittersweet thing that happens when you read a book, is if you find a book you love, and then you get 3/4 of the way through it, there's this feeling that you're excited about seeing how it all comes together, but you don't want it to end. You don't want to have to put it up on the bookshelf. So it's a bittersweet thing. Enter the mystery series, because you have that bittersweet feeling, but then you know there are more to come, and the protagonist and the cohort of characters are going to be back for another book. And those of us who like to read mystery series, we love the prolific authors. Michael can attest to that. And FYI, Lesson in Woo-Woo and Murder is the 9th in the series, but I just finished the second draft of the 17th. So there'll be plenty more to come. For those of you, if you get into it, you don't have to have that really bittersweet feeling for a long time. In the 80s, I got a job teaching graduate students the process of psychotherapy and group psychotherapy. And one day, the dean told me she wanted to talk to me. I didn't think I'd be expelled, but I wasn't sure. So I go in there, and she tells me that the human sexuality professor had an emergency. They couldn't teach the course, and she wanted me to teach the course. Now, I don't know about you. My human sexuality training happened in the backseat of my car, and I wasn't quite, I thought I may need to step it up to teach the course, But I told her, sure, I can do that. And she said, great, it starts next week. All that is true. What isn't true is what I wrote in A Lesson in Sex and Murder. It's over here. My first book in the series. And I called it A Lesson In because, first off, I knew I needed to learn about human sexuality, but I'd written 3 non-fiction self-help books, but I'd never written a fiction book. I'd never written a mystery, so I knew I had things to learn, and so I called that book A Lesson In. One of my favorite mystery writers is a person by the name of Kinky Friedman. Some of you may know him, some of you may not. A very irreverent country western singer who happens to be, among his fans, he lists Bill Clinton, George Bush, and David Unger. And in his book, now he lives in Texas, for real, but in his books, he puts himself in Greenwich Village, New York, and he's a country western singer in a local bar there. And then mysteries fall in his lap, and he very irreverently solves them. And I thought, if it's good enough for Kinky, good enough for George, good enough for Bill, it's good enough for me. So if you read the books and you enjoy the character, that's purely a reflection of me. If you don't enjoy the character, that's fiction. In the sex book, I started by standing in line behind a couple of women as we're going to register for the conference. And these 2 women start talking about what is the best sex they ever had. Now, I don't know about you, but I had to listen in on that conversation. And the 2 stories they tell are stories I heard when I taught the group therapy class. Now, I protected the anonymity of those 2 women, but I kept those stories. And if you read the book, you'll hopefully know why. So when I finished the sex book, I wanted to write a book about going to a music festival. And in the music festival, I started that book by standing in the ticket line behind 3 guys who were talking about what was the best concert, best festival they'd ever been to. And thus was born the beginning of all my books. What is the best? The next book was A Lesson in Therapy and Murder. I had, what's the best therapeutic experience you've ever had? And I had A Lesson in Mystery and Murder. What's the best mystery book, movie you've ever seen? So all of them have this theme about what's the best. So with that, I'm going to read you the introduction to A Lesson in Woo-Woo and Murder. The best I ever had? That's really a hard question. It isn't for me. Well then, why don't you answer first? Okay, I will, but I still want to hear from you. What's the best otherworldly, self-enhancing, spiritually awakening moment you've ever known? Let me think about that. Since you brought it up, you tell me. I wanted to hear what she had to say as well. I don't participate in a lot of otherworldly, self-enhancing, spiritually awakening discussions. I don't even know if I've ever had any of those experiences, but perhaps I have. I suppose I find out this week because we were standing in line to get our tickets to the Whole Life Exposition, which I imagined would be full of people who'd had these experiences and be trying to sell me something so I could join the club. I'm not against joining a club, but I tend to hover on the fringes when it comes to things that require membership. I might buy a few shares in the woo-woo world, but I wouldn't be a big investor. What lay ahead of me remained to be seen. All I knew was that I was getting paid to be here, and I had a job to do. You won't believe this, but I saw the future. Not all of it, but clearly some of it. It was like deja vu, but this was future view. I've seen this moment. living it now is exactly as I saw it. What? This exact moment we're having? Was I in it? Was I saying this? Is that what you saw? Yes and no. I don't know. I didn't know you were going to say that specifically. But here's the trippy part. Not only did I see this moment coming, you did too. Wait, you saying I actually foresaw this moment? I don't think so. I had no clue we were going to be here doing this. Yes, you did. It's eerie, but it's true. I'll tell you. Do I need to sit down? No, you'll be fine. This moment we're having right now, you did know was coming. Maybe not this exact way, but close enough. You thought it, you felt it, you knew it, but you didn't consciously register it. Yeah, well, I have no idea what my subconscious has been up to. You and everyone else, yet as soon as I share it, you'll say, yeah, you're right, I knew that. What's the big deal? Huh? As soon as I tell you, you're going to say, that ain't no woo-woo. But that's where you're wrong. It is woo-woo. And the fact that you don't think it is, well, that's part of the woo-woo. You might think it ain't, but it is. I'm confused. What is this not big deal? You're going to tell me that I'm going to tell you I knew all along and it's no big deal. You knew this. You knew this would start with, what's the best? They all start there. Yeah, I knew that. That ain't no woo-woo. That's just doing the same thing over and over and over again. You can think that, but what I'm telling you is, woo-woo ain't all you think it is. That's the prelude to the book. And like the person in line says, I just keep doing the same thing over and over and over again. One thing you ought to know about me is I'm what they call a pantster. And a pantster, you know what a pantster is? A pantster is somebody who writes by the seat of their pants. I am not alone in that. Mark Twain, Ernest Hemingway, Stephen King, Raymond Chandler, none of them, they all wrote some of their books, not all their books, but they wrote some of their books by the seat of their pants. No outline, no plot. I know maybe a few words. I know the title, maybe I know the location, but I don't really know who done it, why they done it, where they done it. And as such, the books are just as much a mystery to me as they are to the reader. So it really makes writing them a lot of fun for me. Now, I know the term woo-woo is not the most reverent of terms. And I've been told that by more than one person. But it's the words I use to describe those sort of magic, mystical tour of things that are outside my awareness and comprehension. Of course, a lot of things fall under that realm. But for me, I don't understand how tarot card workers work, how psychics works, how mediums work. It's a world unbeknownst to me. And I think when people generally talk about woo-woo, it's unconventional beliefs relating to spirituality, mysticism, maybe alternative medicines. Being a chiropractor, acupuncture, meditation, all used to be considered woo-woo things. Here in California, they're mainstream. But in the rest of the world, some of those things are still woo-woo. But bit by bit, some of these things that are in the woo-woo world are becoming more and more accepted in the mainstream. So here's how I described the conference. The Whole Life Expo was a new age, spiritual, natural health, conscious living, metaphysical, extraterrestrial, enlightening hodgepodge of vendors, speakers, and snake oil purveyors. Left to my own devices, I'd not have gone. When I thought about writing a mystery series, first off, I wanted to stump the reader. I wanted you to suspect this person, then suspect that person, then suspect the other person. So that was certainly part of what I wanted to do. But I also And I have a sense of humor sometimes, and I wanted to bring that in. I wanted to engage the readers. But my greatest wish with the mysteries was that 2 weeks, 3 weeks, a month later, that the reader would be talking to someone and things would get uncomfortable, maybe be a little argumentative, and the discussion was just not going well. And all of a sudden they would say or do something and it calmed the waters. And everything like worked out all right. And they left that and they'd be reflecting on themselves and say, what the heck did I just do? And then this little woo-woo light would go off and they go, I read about that thing in that guy's book. And when that little woo-woo light went off, I'm thinking that's going to transmit that energy to wherever I am in the world, and a smile's going to come over my face because I knew my book helped somebody make their life better. So that's my woo-woo wish. I want to read one more excerpt from the book. In the book, I'm smitten by Nova, the love doctor. And Nova had a booth where she would dispense love advice to people. And she had to go make a phone call. And this is the 80s. She didn't have her phone in her pocket. She had to go to the lobby, find a payphone, and make a call. So she asked me if I would hold down the fort in her booth, and if somebody came, just to tell them she'd be right back. So here's what's happened when she asked me to do that. Oh, there you are, said a harried-looking woman. I've been by a couple of times, but you weren't here. She sat down in the other chair. Just listen for a few minutes, then advise me what to do in the last few. I know you can't fix everything in 5 minutes, but I'm hoping you can help me a little. Let me, please, be quiet and listen. You don't Shh, just be quiet and listen. My husband is depressed. He won't admit it. I told him to see a therapist. He says therapists are full of it. I'm on the fence. Here's what I need you to do. Help me make him perky. He used to be happier, yet for the past year or so, for no discernible reason, he's been moping around all the time. He doesn't want to go out, to see friends. We haven't had sex since I can't remember when. What can I do? I ought to tell you, not yet. There's more. Is he depressed because he suspects I'm having an affair? I don't plan to stop the affair, and I don't plan to leave him, but his being down all the time is wearing on me. What should I do? I think, hold on, there's more. I'm having the affair with his boss, who's now complaining because my husband's attitude. He wants to fire him, but he won't as long as I keep sleeping with him, which I admit I don't want to stop doing. But if you can't cheer my husband up, something bad is going to happen. Are you done? Yes, you can go now. You're right about this. This will take more than 5 minutes to handle, but the answer is things are not always what they seem. What's that? That's it? If your husband won't go to therapy, why don't you? You could do it one of two ways. You can go and share your dilemma and see if he will help assist you or she will help you assist you, or you can go to the therapist and present yourself as if you were your husband and see what they recommend he do. So that was my advice to her. I got in trouble for that a little bit. Actually, the advice I recommended was something I gleaned from psychiatrist Irvin Yalom. And for those of you that don't know Irvin Yalom, he's my favorite writer of psychology textbooks, novels. They have his books here if you want to buy one. But he heard about a psychiatrist that was very depressed, and the psychiatrist's wife said to the psychiatrist, go see a therapist, and the psychiatrist was too vain, he wouldn't do it. So the wife went and found a psychiatrist and said to that psychiatrist, I'm going to pay you to go see my husband as his patient. Don't ever let him know that I'm paying you to be there, but I want you as the patient to help him with his depression. So Yalom heard that, and then he wrote a book that somewhat twisted that, but was on it, called When Nietzsche Wept, which is maybe it isn't here. It's a great book. And so I twisted that a little bit of giving her my advice about you could go and find out how to do this if you're a husband. But this presents an interesting, well, first of all, therapists sometimes will work and say something directly to a client, but a lot of times they use metaphor, innuendo, try to say things more subtly. And what'll happen is at some point, a client will get this little woo-woo light bulb and they'll say something and then they'll look at the therapist and say, why didn't you ever tell me that? And the therapist will say, I told you that a dozen times already. But the therapist doesn't say that because the goal is to empower the client. So they're going to say, oh, that's so great that you thought of that. That's really wonderful and well done. Now, this leads to an interesting piece of research that therapists that are very active, that they have clients do homework, they talk a lot, they're very heavily hands-on involved, those clients perceive that therapist as the most effective. Therapists that are more laid back, do less, are less involved, clients perceive that therapy as the most effective. So it creates a great dilemma for therapists. Do I want to be perceived as the most effective, or do I want the therapy to be perceived as the most effective? I'm going to leave you with that dilemma because I think this is me being indirect, I think somewhere in your life that dynamic plays out, and maybe you can figure out how to solve that for yourself. In the meantime, I'll answer any questions, any comments anybody wants to make. I'm happy to address any of those. Yeah.
You're writing this series. How important is it to read them in order?
It's not. However, yeah, everyone is what they call a standalone. So I certainly recommend, if you haven't read any of my books, I would start with the woo-woo because you'll either really like it and go, oh, I want to start from the beginning. And if you read them, now there's some people who are mystery series buffs, and those people only start at the beginning and they read them all through. And for those people, since I'm one of those people, I drop little things in the book that for those who've read the books, they'll have a little smile. But if you haven't read them, it goes over your head. It's just a little fact. But I think I would just start in the moment. Start with this one. I think this one is, well, I think they're all fun, but I think this one is particularly fun. And I mean, if you like the excerpts I read, they're sort of, I'll tell you something, it's not a critique I got, but it was an interesting piece of feedback. The books read very quickly, and they're pretty funny. And somebody told me, there are a lot of little therapeutic insights, tricks of the trade, but because it goes so quickly, they had to reread it to pick up some of them. So when I said that somebody would think of something and then they'd use it'll be unconscious, and then all of a sudden it'll happen for you, and you'll go, oh yeah, that's what I read in the book. Yeah.
So how did the comedic element come in? Because comedy and murder side by side, that creates a good tension. Comedy is funny, murder is horrible, so it's a nice tension.
It's a very good question. I can't divorce myself from my sense of humor, and I got a ding in one of my reviews that was that none of the the mysteries are in what they call cozy. Agatha Christie was a cozy writer because they would happen like in a bookstore and we'd all be here, it's nice and cozy, and then all of a sudden he's not here anymore. What happened? But the cozy factor doesn't have violence in it. So the criticism I got, such as it was we don't see any of the murders. Mostly I read about them in the paper, I hear about them. So there's not the grisly, violent aspect of it. So yeah, it's a little awkward having comedy with murder. So I can understand, like, really? How does that work?
It's a great combo, though, because it's hard to match that, to balance it well, you know. So it's like a posure. So it creates a lot of interest in it, I think.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, if you've just heard, oh, murder, and like when you read in the newspaper about a murder, they don't have too many jokes in that article. But I think it's my character tends to be funny, and then, but when you read about how he deals with the murders, he does deal with them pretty seriously and respectfully, but then he has to be who he is. And, but around the murders, he's pretty serious. Yeah.
So, are any of the characters in your book based on people you might know, or even in this room?
Well, I want to get out of here alive, so I'm not going to answer that directly. There is one character in the book, in this book, that's heavily related to somebody I know, and the character's name is Sheridan, and in real life he has a different name. But what I like about it is I hear my friend talking, and so it's so clear to me, and it's so much easier that way to write that character, because I'm not being a pantster. I just meet a character on page 5. I have no idea it's like when you see someone on the street, I meet them on the street, I just have that initial hint on who they are, but I don't really know who they are. But this one I knew from the beginning, and it was so much easier to have him. So usually in the books, I have one, maybe 2 people who are connected to people that I know. And it's sad for me because in one book I introduced my 2 best friends, and I had my 2 best friends in the book, and I thought, oh, they're going to be with me now for all the rest of the books. I couldn't kill one of them necessarily, but they didn't make it to any more books. And it was so disappointing to me, but the story has a mind of its own, and so I'm following it. And so that's the delightful part about being an author, this kind of an author, because I'm the reader as I'm the writer.
So no annoying neighbors in there, huh?
Well, I'm going to write the lesson in neighbors and murder. That's coming up.
Speaking of voice, David, does David Unger sound like you?
Well, if you listen to the audiobooks, which I know is a no-no in this room here, but if somebody listens to the audiobooks, I have a narrator who does that, and he actually sounds like me, but when I write, I hear me doing, so I think, my guess is if you read one of the books, you're gonna hear me. And I was so pleased when the first person I got a review from someone who didn't know me, didn't know what I sound like, they had no sense of who I was, and when they got me, that was so great, because I figured, all right, well, you have a leg up on somebody else, you have a sense of who I am, you'll read the book, you'll probably see me and think of me as you read the book, but that somebody who didn't know me, somebody could read the book and get me, made me feel as an author, oh, I accomplished what I wanted to accomplish there. You going to say something?
Yeah, I've never heard this term pantster before, so I'm curious about that style. Does that preclude, I mean, I'm sure you edit, but does it preclude editing the plot? Like later on down through the story, like, oh, wait a minute, I should do this. Is that like sort of off, work that way, or?
I've been when I wrote my first book, I was driving back and forth to Los Angeles a lot, and I would move in my mind seeds around, and I go, oh no, they were all in the bookstore, and then this thing happened. Something must have happened before that happened, so then I'd have to write a scene before the bookstore. So the first one I had to do more of that,
Yeah.
but now I'm able to tell the story, and I don't know. I mean, it's magic how it happens, but it just flows, and I don't. There's this thing called a developmental editor, and a developmental editor looks at your book and goes, "Okay, this scene needs to go before this scene.
Yeah.
This you need more." And when it goes to my editor, they don't say that to me. So I've been very fortunate and part of that is I follow the story. So if the scene is if the scene's in the bookstore, then if I'm writing it, they're in the bookstore, and then what would happen next? Well, okay, I'd leave the bookstore, and then I'd see somebody doing something, and then I'd follow them. And then, so I mean, I just sort of progress, like what would be the next thing, and since I'm the main character, and I'm in charge with solving the whodunit, it's like, how do I, and I do have some relationship to Clouseau, so I do sort of bumble I'm not a very good detective, but I use my therapeutic skills to get the list of the group of suspects together, and sort of we're all the suspects, the final scenes in my book, they're all here, and I know one of you done it, and then how am I going to get that one of you to spill the beans? And so that's been the real fun part for me, because I always end it what they call in the mystery world a reveal. So and I can't keep doing it the same way in every book. So now, like I'm on the 17th book, the reveal has to be different than it was in the first book. And a funny thing that's happened is I now have, when I'm starting after like the 4th, 5th book, I have people characters who've read my earlier books. And so they sort of know how I do my thing. And so that makes it a little trickier, because I can't do my thing anymore, because somebody, like, not everybody here knows my thing, but he knows it, and he might be the killer, so I have to tweak it a little bit. So it's been a great challenge for me as a writer.
Thank you.
All right, well, yeah.
Have you given any thought, if in the future you decided you wanted to end this series and start another one, how you would end the series?
Somebody else asked me that question today, a radio station in Mississippi. So the woo-woo here is, I don't, because since I'm a pantster, I have no idea when or how it's going to come to any conclusion. I keep having difficulty with the reveal, so at some point I'm going to go, I can't think of this anymore. And so I may, just because I get stumped when I get to the end, have to go, all right, well, this one I have to end. And there is a little subplot in these books about how I might be involved in some of the killings.
Oh.
So I have a little ... like, is part of the final reveal going to be, am I the killer? Or have I been participated in all that? And you better all hope you get out of here.
You said you were working on 17, you completed 9. How often do you publish?
My publicist doesn't want me to do more than 1 a year. I want to do 2 or 3, because I'm so backed up now. I want to get another one. My next one is A Lesson in Dogs Murder, and I want to get it out by the end of the year.
Yeah.
He wants me to get it out of the beginning of next year. So we're having a wrestling with that. And the dogs, I go to the Beverly Hills Kennel Club dog show. So those of you that like the dog shows, this will be a good one to look forward to. The dogs all make it out alive. So.
Well, Dr. David Unger, thank you very much for joining us, and thank you everyone for coming. Please applaud one more.
All right, well, thank you.